The fire crackles low. Pine smoke clings to the logs, and a hot cup warms the hands that used to grip a rifle. Outside this cabin, the wind keeps knocking like it has business here. Here's the thing, brothers. Leaving the battlefield does not mean the war ends. Sometimes the quiet is the loudest sound in the world.
I suggest you
Silence
and
can
your dog
feel
leave.
like a safety
Trying to have a
zone,
nice evening.
right up until it isn't.
We're not
Right up
going
until the
anywhere,
ghosts
Trace.
of the past learn your address.
Because that's how it started in Savannah on Christmas Eve.
A warm restaurant, soft lights, garlands on brick walls, and a man with money in his smile who decided to test the wrong line, mocking a guy in a red and black flannel and a service dog that reads, "Service dog, do not pet." So I'm asking you straight. When you get boxed in, when somebody tries to strip your dignity in public, do you run back into the shadows? Or do you hold the line? That night, the breach came fast. Lights flickered, wires sparked, smoke crawled out of the back like a warning. And the same man who laughed loudest slipped hardest, right as the truth started closing in. Sit down, brothers. Stay with me. This one is not just a story about instant regret. It is a lesson about survival, about being the protector, and about what happens when a fragile peace finally breaks. Christmas on River Street. Christmas Eve settled over Savannah with damp cold and river fog, lights trembling along the cobblestones as wind rolled in from the water, carrying the smell of salt, pine, and something unfinished. Gavin Hale moved through the crowd with measured steps, his left leg dragging just enough to remind him it would never fully forgive the past. He wore a red and black flannel shirt beneath a dark jacket, broad shoulders filling the fabric without effort. A few strands of gray threaded his beard and crept into his temples, catching the glow of Christmas lights like quiet confessions of time. At his side walked a 5-year-old German shepherd, black and tan, powerful and alert. The dog wore a black harness, clean and unmistakable, the white lettering sharp against the night. Service dog, do not pet. The animal moved in silent rhythm with Gavin, eyes scanning, body calm, every step intentional. Gavin did not come to River Street to celebrate. He came because the restaurant at the corner of the block had called about a failing electrical panel, and emergency rates paid better during the holidays. He told himself it was just work. But Christmas had a way of pulling memories from places he preferred to keep sealed. The restaurant stood old and proud, brick walls wrapped in garlands, tall windows glowing amber. Laughter spilled out each time the door opened. Gavin paused before entering, fingers tightening around the strap of his tool bag. Somewhere deep, an old instinct stirred, the one that warned him when things were about to shift. Inside, warmth rushed over him. Conversations hummed, glasses clinked. A piano played something soft and familiar. Heads turned, briefly, then away. Most people saw a repairman. Some noticed the dog and stiffened. A few read the harness and nodded with reluctant acceptance. From near the center of the room, Madeline Carter watched him step inside. She was 33, with light brown hair worn loose to her shoulders, and a posture that suggested both confidence and caution. Her coat was tailored, elegant without excess, and she held herself like someone used to being listened to. Yet her eyes betrayed something else, a careful distance, a habit of measuring rooms before settling into them. Madeline, Maddie to the people who knew her well, had not come for celebration either. She sat at a small table near the windows, documents tucked neatly into her bag, hands wrapped around a mug she had not touched. Tonight mattered. The funding discussion she was here for could keep a community shelter open through winter. She had told herself she could handle one dinner, one conversation with a man she already suspected would be difficult. That man arrived moments after Gavin. Chase Langford entered like he owned the space. 38, clean-cut, expensive suit, polished shoes that never touched dirt unless it was intentional.
His smile was sharp and practiced, the kind designed to disarm and dominate at the same time. People noticed him. He expected that. "Madeline," Chase said smoothly, stopping at her table. "I hope you haven't been waiting long." "Not long," she replied, polite, controlled. Her voice was steady, but her shoulders tightened as he sat. Chase's eyes flicked past her, landing on Gavin and the dog. The corners of his mouth lifted, not in humor, but appraisal. "Well," he murmured, loud enough to carry, "Savannah really does let anyone in these days." Maddie followed his gaze. She saw Gavin standing near the host stand, quietly explaining the electrical issue to the manager. She noticed the way he kept his body angled between the dog and the room, protective without aggression. She felt an unexpected irritation rise in her chest. "That's a service dog," she said quietly. Chase waved it off. "I'm sure it is." Gavin felt the eyes before he heard the words. Years of training had left him sensitive to shifts in tone, to the subtle tightening of air before conflict. He finished speaking with the manager and turned slightly, meeting Chase's stare without expression. His face revealed nothing. That, more than anything, seemed to bother Chase. Gavin had learned long ago that reacting was often a gift to the wrong person. Silence unsettled them more. As he knelt to open the electrical panel, the dog sat at his side, still as stone. Gavin's hands moved with calm precision, but his thoughts drifted. Christmas. Crowded rooms. Men who mistook money for authority. He had seen that type before, in places far from Georgia, where consequences came faster and louder. Across the room, Maddie watched Gavin work. She told herself she was only passing time, yet something about the man drew her attention. The steadiness, the absence of show, the way the dog never took its eyes off him. Chase noticed her glance and frowned. "You seem distracted," he said. "I'm listening," Maddie replied, though her tone cooled. The lights flickered once, a subtle dip, then steady again. A ripple of murmurs moved through the room. Gavin straightened slowly, eyes narrowing at the panel. Something was wrong. Not dangerous yet, but close enough to demand respect. He closed the panel and rose, the dog standing with him, both moving as one. "Sir," Gavin said to the manager, voice low but firm, "I need a few minutes to shut this down properly. There's been interference. Someone's been in here who didn't know what they were doing." The words landed heavier than expected. Chase's smile thinned. Maddie felt it then. The shift. Like a floor settling before a crack. She did not know why, but she had the sudden sense that this Christmas Eve was about to leave marks on everyone in the room. And Gavin Hale, standing in his red and black flannel beside a silent German shepherd, felt it too. Some nights were quiet, others were tests, the cost of arrogance. Warm air hummed beneath garlands and chandeliers as the river fog pressed against the windows, and somewhere outside, a distant church bell marked time with slow, patient authority. The lights steadied after their brief flicker, but the room had changed. Conversations no longer flowed easily. People watched the ceiling, the walls, the man kneeling by the electrical panel in a red and black flannel shirt, and the German shepherd seated beside him like a carved sentinel. Gavin Hale felt the tension settle into his shoulders. The panel told a story he did not like. Wires recently handled, connections forced where patience should have been used. Sloppy shortcuts.
the kind of work done by someone rushing, or worse, someone who believed consequences belonged to other people. He closed the panel again and stood slowly. His left leg protested as it always did when he rose too fast. He ignored it. "This system needs a controlled shutdown," Gavin said to the restaurant manager. 5 minutes. No shortcuts. The manager, a woman in her early 50s with cropped hair and tired eyes, nodded immediately. Eleanor Brooks had run this place for decades. She trusted competence when she saw it. "Do what you need," she said. "I'll let the staff know." Across the room, Chase Langford leaned back in his chair, fingers wrapped loosely around a glass of wine. His expression suggested mild amusement, but his eyes had sharpened. 5 minutes, he repeated, loud enough to draw attention. On Christmas Eve. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Maddie Carter felt heat rise in her chest. She knew Chase's tone well. He used it when he wanted to remind people who held power. She had learned to endure it for the sake of her work, but tonight, the target was not her. "Chase," she said quietly, "this is about safety." He smiled at her as if indulging a child. "Of course, I just find it interesting how easily everyone defers." His gaze slid to the dog. "And that thing," he added, "is it really necessary?" The German Shepherd did not move. Black and tan fur caught the light. The harness sat clean across its chest. The words, "Service dog, do not pet," impossible to miss. Its eyes stayed on Gavin, waiting. Gavin felt the insult land, old and familiar. He had heard worse in darker places. Still, something tightened behind his ribs. Not anger, something colder. "He's working," Gavin said evenly. Chase laughed. A short sound, performative. "So are you," he replied. "Doesn't mean you both belong here." Eleanor Brooks stepped forward, her voice firm. "Sir, that's enough." Chase raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense intended." But offense was exactly what he intended. Maddie watched Gavin closely, half expecting a reaction. She saw none. His face remained still, his posture relaxed but grounded. It unsettled her. Strength without display always did. Gavin crouched again, reaching for his tools. The dog shifted with him, precise, controlled. Together, they moved toward the panel room at the back. As they passed Chase's table, Chase leaned slightly forward. His hand brushed the edge of the dog's harness. It was subtle, casual, deliberate. The dog reacted instantly, rising between Gavin and Chase, body tense, head lifted, a low warning sound vibrating in its chest. No teeth, no lunge, just a clear boundary drawn. The room froze. Gavin straightened, his hand lifting calmly, 2 fingers brushing the dog's collar. The animal settled immediately, returning to a sit, eyes still locked on the threat. "Don't," Gavin said quietly. The word carried weight, not loud, not dramatic, but absolute. Chase's smile faltered. For a fraction of a second, something like uncertainty crossed his face. Then pride surged to cover it. "Relax," he scoffed. "It's just a dog." Maddie stood before she realized she had decided to. "You crossed a line," she said. Her voice shook, but not with fear. Chase turned to her, annoyance flashing. "You're overreacting." At that moment, the lights dipped again, deeper this time. A murmur rippled through the dining room. Then came a sharp crack from the back, a spark, the smell of burning insulation. Gavin moved before anyone shouted. "Everyone step back," he called, voice cutting cleanly through the noise. Now! Years of command threaded through the calm. People obeyed without knowing why. A small flame flared near the panel room doorway. Eleanor Brooks swore under her breath. Fire extinguisher, she called. Gavin was already there, grabbing it, positioning his body between the flame and the nearest tables. The dog stood rigid at his side, watching the room, ready. Chase had risen too fast. In his haste, his polished shoe slipped on the damp floor near the bar. He went down hard, glass shattering, wine splashing across his suit. A collective gasp filled the room. The flame died quickly under the extinguisher's hiss. Smoke thinned. Alarms did not sound. Disaster pulled back, just barely. Silence followed. Chase sat on the floor, stunned, soaked, staring at his ruined jacket. Gavin turned off the extinguisher and looked at the panel again. His jaw tightened. This didn't happen by accident, he said. Maddie felt her heart hammer. She looked at Chase, then back at Gavin, and for the first time that night, she understood something fundamental. Arrogance did not always destroy others. Sometimes it turned inward. And this was only the beginning. Truth under the lights. Smoke thinned into a bitter haze as the river fog pressed harder against the windows, blue lights flickering outside and reflecting across garlands that now looked fragile and out of place. Gavin Hale stood near the panel room, red and black flannel dusted with white extinguisher residue, breathing steady as his pulse slowed. The German shepherd remained at his side, black harness straight, service dog, do not pet, stark and visible. The dog's ears tracked every sound. Its body stayed loose but ready. The restaurant had gone quiet in the way rooms do after danger retreats. People spoke in whispers. Phones hovered in hands. Chairs scraped softly as guests made space for the uniformed figures entering through the front door. 2 firefighters moved first, broad-shouldered, soot-smudged, efficient. Behind them came a police officer with a notepad and a tired, professional calm. He was in his mid-30s, short dark hair, square jaw, eyes that missed little. His name tag read Mark Reynolds. He carried himself like someone used to sorting truth from noise. Eleanor Brooks met them halfway, composed despite the tension. She explained what had happened, pointing to the panel room, then to Gavin. He stopped it, she said simply, before it became worse. Mark Reynolds nodded and turned to Gavin. I'll need a statement. Gavin inclined his head. He did not volunteer more than asked. He never had. He described the interference, the shortcuts, the unsafe connections. His words were precise, technical, unemotional. The kind of testimony built on facts rather than drama. As he spoke, Maddie Carter watched him from across the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrapped them around a cup of water someone had pressed into her palm. She replayed the moment of the spark, the smell of burning wire, the sound of Gavin's voice cutting through panic. Calm, certain, protective. She realized something then. She trusted him. Chase Langford sat on a chair near the bar, blotting his suit with napkins that only spread the stain. His face was flushed, his pride bruised deeper than his hip. He laughed too loudly at something a server said, trying to regain control of the room by force of presence. Mark Reynolds approached him next. Sir, the officer said, were you injured? Chase waved him off. No, just embarrassed by the incompetence on display. Mark's pen paused. You mentioned earlier you had arranged prior electrical work here. Chase's smile tightened. I recommended a contractor, as a favor. Eleanor Brooks stiffened. That contractor didn't have authorization to touch the panel. A murmur rippled through nearby tables. Gavin felt a familiar weight settle in his chest. This was the moment when truths either surfaced or were buried. He had seen both outcomes play out in places where consequences came faster than apologies. Mark Reynolds glanced between them. Names? Chase hesitated. Just a beat. Enough. Maddie felt her stomach drop. She knew that hesitation. She had seen it in boardrooms, in negotiations that masked coercion as generosity. Chase cleared his throat. I can provide documentation. Please do, Mark said evenly. The firefighters returned with confirmation. The wiring showed signs of rushed work, non-compliant parts, dangerous improvisation. It's lucky this didn't turn into a full ignition, one of them said. Lucky. The word echoed in Maddie's mind. Chase stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm a supporter of this establishment. I won't be spoken to like a suspect. Mark Reynolds met his gaze. Everyone's a suspect until the facts say otherwise. Silence fell again. Gavin watched Chase carefully, not with satisfaction, with recognition. He had known men like this, men who mistook influence for immunity, men who believed pressure could replace integrity. The officer turned back to Gavin. You said someone interfered with the panel recently. Yes, Gavin replied. Within the last 48 hours. The work shows haste, no testing, no respect for load balance. Mark nodded. He scribbled notes, then glanced at the dog. And the dog? Service animal, Gavin said. Trained. The German shepherd sat, unmoving, eyes forward. Mark smiled faintly despite himself. Good dog, he said. The dog did not respond. Across the room, Maddie finally moved. She stepped toward Gavin, her posture tentative but resolved. Thank you, she said quietly, for what you did. Gavin looked at her then, really looked. He saw the worry she hid behind composure, the fatigue of carrying responsibility without certainty. He nodded once. It was my job, he said. She almost smiled at that. Almost. Chase watched the exchange with narrowing eyes. Something inside him curdled. He took a step forward, voice rising. This is absurd, he snapped. You're all making assumptions. Mark Reynolds closed his notebook. We'll be following up, he said. There will be questions. As the responders prepared to leave, the room slowly began to breathe again. Conversations resumed in low tones. But the balance had shifted. Maddie felt it. So did Chase. Gavin clipped his tool bag closed. The job was not finished, but the truth had started moving. He rested a hand briefly on the dog's harness. The steady presence grounded him. Christmas Eve had not ended. It had only turned a corner. And somewhere beneath the fading smoke and flickering lights, arrogance had begun to feel the first sharp edge of consequence. Cracks in the facade. Morning rain swept across Savannah in thin, slanting sheets, washing ash from the sidewalks as Christmas lights blinked on in daylight, stubbornly cheerful against a city waking to consequences. Gavin Hale walked River Street with the steady rhythm of a man used to moving forward, whether the ground agreed or not. The red and black flannel hung open at the collar, darkened slightly by mist. His left leg tugged at him with each step, a dull reminder he had learned to carry without comment. At his side, the 5-year-old German shepherd paced in silence, black harness snug. Service dog, do not pet, clear as a rule written in stone. The restaurant sat behind them now, boarded for inspection. Last night's smoke had settled into rumor. By morning, rumor hardened into questions. Gavin preferred distance. He had given his statement. He had fixed what could be fixed. The rest belonged to systems and people who believed in them. Still, he felt the pull of unfinished things, a tension he recognized from long ago. Trouble did not like to be ignored. His phone buzzed, a number he did not recognize. He let it go to voicemail. Across town, Maddie Carter stood in a narrow office with beige walls and fluorescent lights that hummed like insects. She wore the same tailored coat from the night before, hair pulled back now, face drawn with fatigue. Sleep had not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw sparks, heard Gavin's voice, felt the sudden awareness that safety was more fragile than paperwork suggested. 3 members of the board sat across from her, papers spread, brows furrowed. They were good people, mostly. Careful, risk-averse. "The situation is delicate," said Thomas Keene, early 60s, silver hair, gentle manner that masked a lifelong habit of avoiding conflict. "Donors are asking questions." Maddie nodded. "They should. Transparency matters." Another board member, Lisa Moreno, mid-40s, sharp eyes behind thin frames, leaned forward. "Chase Langford has called twice this morning. He claims your presence last night created confusion." Maddie felt heat rise in her chest, then settle into something colder. "Chase created confusion when he pressured a business into unsafe contracts." Thomas sighed. "He is threatening to withdraw funding." Silence followed. Maddie knew that silence. It was the sound of fear counting costs. "If we back down," she said carefully, "we teach people like him that intimidation works." Lisa met her gaze, conflicted. "And if we don't, the shelter closes." The words landed heavier than accusation. Maddie thought of the women she knew by name, the children who colored quietly in corners while adults filled out forms. She thought of promises she had made, believing integrity would be enough. She straightened. "I won't lie to protect him." Across the city, Chase Langford stood in a glass-walled office overlooking the river. Suit replaced with a pressed shirt and slacks that did nothing to soften the bruise blooming along his hip. His reflection stared back at him from every angle. He did not like what he saw. He ended a call with a sharp tap of his finger, jaw tight. People were hesitating. Words like investigation and liability were being used too freely. He was not accustomed to resistance. A woman stood near the door, clipboard in hand. Rachel Whitman, early 30s, neat bun, alert eyes. His executive assistant. Efficient. Loyal until proven otherwise. "They're asking for emails," she said evenly. "From the contractor." Chase scoffed. "Let them ask." Rachel hesitated. "There are messages." Chase's eyes snapped to her. "I told you to handle it." "I did," she replied, voice calm but firm. "But copies exist." For the first time, unease threaded through his confidence. He dismissed her with a wave and turned back to the window, watching rain stripe the glass. Control had always been his armor. Now it felt thin. Gavin's phone buzzed again. This time he answered. "Mr. Hale," said Mark Reynolds on the other end, voice steady. "We have questions." Gavin exhaled. "I figured you would." They met near the boarded restaurant an hour later. Mark wore the same professional calm, rain beating on his jacket. He listened as Gavin explained more details, pointing out where the work had been forced, how authorization logs did not match timestamps. "You didn't have to come," Mark said. Gavin shrugged. "Truth doesn't like shortcuts." Mark studied him a moment. "You military?" "Used to be," Gavin replied. The dogs shifted, watching a passing pedestrian with quiet vigilance. Mark nodded, understanding without pressing. "We'll be contacting the contractor, and Mr. Langford." Gavin felt no satisfaction in that. Only a distant, familiar ache. He had seen what happened when men were cornered. Pride fought harder than sense. Later that afternoon, Maddie stood alone in the shelter's small lobby, phone in hand, staring at Gavin's missed call notification. She had not expected him to reach out. Part of her feared what that meant. Another part hoped. She dialed before doubt could stop her. "Gavin," she said when he answered. Her voice softened despite herself. "They're coming after the funding." "I know," he said. She closed her eyes. "I won't bend." "Good," he replied. "Neither should you." The words steadied her more than reassurance ever could. As the rain eased and Savannah breathed again, lines were being drawn. Paper trails surfaced. Conversations turned careful. The city did what cities did when faced with exposure. And Chase Langford, watching his reflection blur in rain-streaked glass, felt something unfamiliar press in. Fear. What remains after the fall? Late afternoon sunlight broke through thinning clouds, turning the river bronze as Savannah exhaled, the air cool and clean in the quiet after rain. Gavin Hale stood across the street from the restaurant, hands resting loosely at his sides. The red and black flannel hung open, familiar as armor he no longer questioned. His left leg ached, a steady thrum he accepted without resentment. At his heel, the 5-year-old German shepherd sat in perfect stillness, black harness straight. Service dog, do not pet, clear and unquestioned. Across the street, doors opened and closed with careful formality. Chase Langford emerged between two men in dark jackets. He no longer looked polished. His hair was disheveled, his posture tight, eyes darting as if the city itself had turned hostile. He spoke quickly, hands slicing the air, but the men beside him did not mirror his urgency. They listened. They nodded. They wrote. Instant regret rarely arrived as thunder. More often, it came as silence. Gavin watched without satisfaction. He had learned long ago that watching someone fall did not lift you. It only reminded you how fragile standing could be. The officers guided Chase toward a waiting car. No handcuffs, no spectacle, just consequences unfolding at their own pace. Chase glanced up once, eyes catching Gavin's across the street. For a moment, something like recognition flickered there. Not remorse, not apology, simply the understanding that power had limits after all. Then the car door closed. Maddie Carter approached from behind Gavin, footsteps soft on damp stone. She wore a simple coat, hair pulled back, face bare of makeup. She looked tired. She also looked lighter. "It's done," she said. Gavin nodded. For now. She stood beside him, close enough that he felt her presence without turning. The dog shifted, acknowledging her with a brief glance before returning to watchful calm. "They won't charge him today," Maddie continued. "But the investigation is moving fast. Emails, contracts, pressure he can't talk his way out of." Gavin remained quiet. He had no need for details. Outcomes mattered more than narratives. "The board voted this morning," she said. "We rejected his funding officially." He turned then, studying her face. That couldn't have been easy. She met his gaze. No, but it was necessary. A faint smile touched his mouth. Not triumph. Respect. They walked together toward the river, the dog pacing in measured silence. Boats drifted slowly past, the city resuming its rhythms with cautious optimism. I was afraid, Maddie said after a moment. Not of him, of losing everything I've built, of being told I was naive for believing ethics mattered. You weren't wrong, Gavin replied. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. When I saw you stand there that night, she said, calm while everything was breaking, I thought, maybe strength doesn't have to shout.
Gavin considered that. It usually doesn't. They stopped near the railing. The sun dipped lower, gilding the water. I owe you, she said. He shook his head. You owe yourself. You chose not to bend. She looked at him then, really looked. The lines at his eyes, the quiet weight he carried. The way the dog leaned subtly into his presence, grounded by it. And you? She asked softly. What do you owe yourself? The question caught him off guard. Gavin turned his gaze to the river. Memories stirred. Places where regret came too late. Choices made under orders and fear. He had spent years believing survival was enough. I owe myself honesty, he said finally. And maybe a chance. Her heart quickened at the words. They stood there as the light faded, not touching, not retreating. Two people learning how to exist in the space between. A voice interrupted them. Mr. Hale! Mark Reynolds approached from the sidewalk, jacket open, demeanor relaxed now that the urgency had passed. He looked relieved, older than he had seemed under fluorescent lights. We'll need you to sign off on a few technical details, Mark said. But your assessment helped. A lot. Glad it did, Gavin replied. Mark glanced at Maddie, then back to Gavin. You did the right thing. Not everyone does. When the officer walked away, Maddie watched him go, then turned back to Gavin. Funny how fast things change. Only when they have to, Gavin said. They walked back toward the shelter together. Inside, laughter echoed softly. A child's voice drifted down the hall. Life, imperfect and persistent. Maddie stopped at the door. I don't know what comes next, she said. For the shelter, or for us. Gavin met her eyes. He felt the familiar urge to retreat, to keep things simple and solitary. He also felt something else. A pull forward. Then we don't decide everything tonight, he said. We just don't walk away. She smiled then, a real one, unguarded. I'd like that, she said. The German shepherd rose and stepped forward, tail low, calm approval written in its posture. As dusk settled over Savannah, the city carried on, unaware of the small turning points that shaped lives. Arrogance had fallen. Integrity had held. And two people, scarred but standing, chose not certainty, but courage. Sometimes, instant regret was not about punishment. Sometimes, it was about clearing space for something better to begin. Sometimes the miracle does not arrive with thunder or bright signs in the sky. Sometimes it comes quietly, through truth being revealed, through courage chosen over fear, through a heart that refuses to bend to what is wrong. This story reminds us that God's will often works through ordinary moments. A decision to stand firm. A choice to protect instead of dominate.
a willingness to trust again, even after pain. In daily life, we may never see the whole plan, but faith means believing that integrity is never wasted, and that pride will always face its reckoning. If this story touched you, take it with you into your own days. Be kind when it is hard. Be brave when it costs something. And trust that God sees what others try to hide. Please share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part spoke to your heart. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, justice, and quiet miracles. May God bless you and keep you, now and always.